Explaining every Pokemon banned in competitive play so far in Generation 9. Starting off, we have Houndstone. Houndstone on paper doesn't look all that menacing. I mean, it looks like every average Pokemon dog in terms of competitive play. But Game Freak gave this Pokemon an interesting move, and that of Last Respect. A grossly overpowered move that powers up with each Pokemon fainted on your team to a max 300 power physical ghost type move. This was absolutely disgusting and ripped through a lot of teams early on. Sand at this time was also probably at the peak of this generation, solely due to Houndstone. I mean, you couldn't guard it with its Sand Rush ability and Last Respects, doubling its speed and having an amazingly powerful move. It quite literally was unguardable. Sand teams literally built around it and had things such as Momentum to get this thing KOs on its team and let it to go to work off a switch and boosting its Last Respects. It was unbelievably nasty with little to no counterplay during its reign in OU. Next up is Flutter Mane. Flutter Mane is probably the most powerful Pokemon with its Fairy and Ghost typing to even touch the OU tier. Its immense power alongside its amazing stats is what made this thing really scary. I mean, just look at them. Fairy and Ghost is one of the scariest offensive combos out there with the ability to hit majority of the meta without being worried. It had great coverage, and on top of that, this thing got Nasty Plot to further increase its already broken special attack stats. Coupled with Photosynthesis ability making stun teams even more hard to build around during this time, and it was pretty much a wrap for the meta. It was too much to handle and too specific and restrictive to team build around with those godly special attack, special defense, and speed stats. Following Flutter Mane is the Dolphin Pokemon Palafin, probably one of the most unique Pokemon made to date. Palafin was cool because of its Zero to Hero ability, allowing it to change forms and change its stat distribution and even gain a higher base stat total. But what wasn't cool was its absolutely blistering offensive stats in its hero form. This was a problem for a couple of reasons. One, it had a signature move of Jet Punch, which was 60 base water type move that always had priority. And with such monstrous stats, this was easily spammable, not to mention powerful. Palafin hero form also had pretty good bulk and could live a variety of moves. Following the Flutter Mane and Houndstone ban at the time, shortly after, Bulk Up and Taunt became a bit more popular, with less fast switches to come in. Bulk Up and Wave Crash was sometimes too overpowering and too meta centralizing, and then alongside Jet Punch made it a hard combo to switch into. Even defensive Pokemon like Great Tusk could be easily dealt with in one blow. Taunt could stop other Pokemon with the intention to status stall it, and Terra Steel could allow it to completely avoid Sludge Bomb from Toxapex and other grass type moves as well. Overall, Palafin hero form was just way too strong and way too overpowering for the meta, following the bans of Flutter Mane and Houndstone, and was called immediately for it to be removed from the meta. After Palafin, next is Iron Bundle, Delibert's powerful futuristic form. Iron Bundle has some of the most ludicrous stats, following Palafin's hero form and Flutter Mane. It is the fastest Pokemon to be released in this generation, and has a blistering strong special attack stat. Iron Bundle was able to really hit hard and really fast with its Choice Specs variation. Choice Specs Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry basically took care of the majority of the meta at hand, and it really just came down to whether or not Hydro Pump would just hit its target. Its hyper-offensive playstyle gave little to no switches into this Pokemon, with Blissey being the only real switch into it. Heavy Duty Boots also proved to be a worthwhile, powerful option, giving popularity to sets of Taunt, Flip Turn, Hydro Pump, and Freeze Dry. Plus, not to mention, Terra Water seemed to be the most optimal to help mitigate its Mach Punch and Bullet Punch weaknesses. Iron Bundle doesn't have that bad of bulk, which made Terra Water to avoid those priority moves a more desirable option. Choice Scarf near the end of its prime in OU also started to have a rise, becoming the most lethal option on the field, but with little to no counterplay and Pokemon to really resist it, the terrifying Mechanical Penguin became a nuisance to deal with, and shortly thereafter was banned from competitive play before it got really out of hand. Chi-Yu shortly after in the following 2 months became the next banned Pokemon. We all remember our favorite goldfish, right? Chi-Yu was a dark and fire type, one of the 4 Ruination Pokemon as well released in this generation. It had unholy special attack, defense, and speed stats. All were way too good and were emphasized way more because of its Beads of Ruin ability. Beads of Ruin allowed to lower the special defense stat of Pokemon permanently on the field, basically already increasing its massive special attack stat even further indirectly. Not to mention, because it was a fire type, it could very well fit on Torkoal Sun photosynthesis teams and be a nightmare from the back. Specs Overheat in the Sun was just filthy and had little to no switches for this Pokemon. It was usually an auto 2-hit KO onto opposing Blissey, and Blissey is one of the most tankiest special walls out there. Not to mention, it got other boosting moves like Nasty Plot to further increase its power if need to be. Near the end of its reign in OU, its heavy-duty boots and Nasty Plot sets became even more disgusting, and allowed to be a more free-fall of damage on your opponent's side. Switches were very hard to come by, with a Chi-Yu usually terrestrializing to other types, to disregard its dark typing such as Terra Fire. With little to no switches and becoming more centralizing because of previous bans taking place, it was gone in January before it left more destruction in its wake. Now, Annihilape probably is one of the most surprising bans that no one would have expected when Generation 9 competitive Pokemon began. Annihilape was able to spiral out of control in matches pretty easily later on. Its signature move of Rage Fist got powerful every time it got hit throughout the match, and it didn't even have bad bulk with splits of 110, 80, and 90, which is what made Bulk Up and Rage Fist such a daunting task to take care of, boosting not only its offensive stats, but its defensive stats as well. Furthermore, with moves like Taunt to stall Pokemon from taking it out, it became one of the most miserable tasks to get rid of this Ghost Pig Monkey. Terrestrialization definitely became Annihilape's best friend, as even though its typing was excellent offensively, defensively that is where we had the issue because it could be hit for super effective pretty easily. Most common Terra for Annihilape to avoid these issues was Terra Water because, well, 1, Water is pretty good defensive typing overall with its bulk, and 2, it could switch into Chi-Yu's Overheat quite nicely and gaining a Rage Fist boost off of that. Therefore, it could still gain recovery even afterwards with leftovers or even through a Drain Punch to keep its momentum going. Just by me describing it, you can see how ridiculous this Pokemon was, and frankly, it's better that it's been kept out of OU because if not careful, it was able to take over matches pretty easily. The third Pokemon to be mentioned on the ban list alongside Chi-Yu and Annihilape in January was Cyclizer. Cyclizer was one of the most disgusting utility Pokemon seen to date, with its nasty speed stat and alright bulk. Cyclizer was most famous with its Shed Tail capabilities alongside its Regenerator ability. Regenerator just allowed it to recover some of that 50% lost HP every time you used Shed Tail, so it could theoretically keep getting Shed Tails off repeatedly in a match with little to no backlash. Shed Tail allowed to get a free Pokemon in on its substitute, which really did take advantage of passive Pokemon, who couldn't really do much to Cyclizer. It was an excellent hyper-offensive Pokemon and was often the cog to help the entire team work, as it had other great utility moves of Knockoff, Rapid Spin, and even U-Turn. Some Cyclizars would even surprise their opponents with a Draco Meteor and dealing big damage before it decided to switch out. Probably the most popular pairing was Grimmsnarl and Cyclizar because dual screens allowed for this frail lizard to live even more hits and get off a Shed Tail with ease. While offensively it wasn't that pressuring, the move Shed Tail on this Pokemon, let alone, was deemed too offensively pressuring and allowed for a lot of unhealthy game strategies behind that substitute that made it difficult to play around. Chien Pao was the next Pokemon to be asked to be banned from competitive Pokemon in the last month, and for good reason. It has a similar ability to Chi-Yu, however, instead of lowering just the special defense stats, it actually lowered the defense stats with its Sword of Ruin ability. Coupled with also its lethal stats, it was faster than Chi-Yu, and while it didn't hit as hard as Chi-Yu, it really did feel like it did with its Dark and Ice coverage. Choice Band Crunches became a hard switch, and with priority given its Ice Shard and Sucker Punch, it was probably one of the most annoying Pokemon to take care of offensively with little to no defensive checks. And while Mach Punch and Bullet Punch were solid offensive checks to it, Terrestrialization made it possible to play around this, and even still, Chien Pao would still get off a lot of major damage onto your opponent's side before a Mach Punch and Bullet Punch came out. It was hard to switch into a Choice Banded Crunch from this thing, or even a Choice Banded Icicle Crash or Ice Spinner, with Azumarill probably being the best chance overall and probably the only real counter to it. This Pokemon didn't pop up before because of other meta Pokemon such as Chi-Yu, but now with all those Pokemon gone, its raw intuitive power started to really shine and take over the meta. Sword Stance sets became really popular as well at this time and allowed for additional attack boost on top of its huge power. Plus 2 Crunch coming from Chien Pao basically was game. And with these two variants of Chien Pao sets, it was definitely clear as midway through its reign, it was becoming even harder to switch in, and the meta started to really solely focus on countering it. If you didn't have any means of countering this Pokemon on your team, consider it a done deal and your team basically to be finished because that's how lethal it was. The last Pokemon to be banned so far in the OU metagame has been Espathra. Following the ban of Chien Pao, Espathra quickly moved up to the OU tier, wasting no time to assert its supremacy. No longer played with popular checks in the OU metagame like Chien Pao, this thing started to unravel into an emu beast never seen before. It started to gain popularity with Earthworm and its Shed-Tail, with Cyclizer now being gone from the meta. See, with Espathra, it got two significant things going for it, that of speed boost and calm mind. These were things that really helped stat buff this Pokemon even further, and that was an issue because Espathra got the move of Stored Power. Stored Power does more damage for the more amounts of boosts you have, and it caps out at 300. 300 base special attacking move that was going off first with little to no switches, it started to be a huge problem, and even Unaware Skeldritch couldn't be much of an assistance because Unaware doesn't block the in-base power of a move. It got other coverage moves as well, like Dazzling Gleam to handle dark type weaknesses in this tier that it had, handling Pokemon such as Roaring Moon and Greninja quite well. Terra Fighting allowed it to hit back Steel types, and Terra Fire allowed it to hit Grass Steel types in addition to being resistant to Skeldritch Torch Song. Although yes, there was a fair bit of gameplay to this Pokemon with Whirlwind, Ting-Lu, and other means, the unknown variability in its terrestrialization is what puzzled most opponents, and made most opponents play a guessing game until they realized they were too late and Espathra was about to clean sweep them. I mean, Terra Dark Clodsire or Skeldritch could provide us solid counters, but then that's asking to be weak to Iron Valiant and other fairy coverage instead of punishing them. There was also an option to even run Haze Toxapex for a while to get rid of Espathra, but that would also require Toxapex to Terra out from Poison and not be weak to its Psychic coverage, and wasting basically a Terra on Toxapex, which really isn't most ideal given that it can be easily pretty much taken care of if it's not Terra'd correctly, and thus this just warranted Espathra to be banned shortly thereafter Chien Pao. With all these 9 Pokemon being banned so far from the OU competitive tier, what are some other Pokemon do you think that needs to be banned from competitive play? Let me know in the comments below, and if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more competitive content just like this, and watch these 2 competitive videos over here as well.